Hey guys, tonight, we drift softly across still water, the kind that hugs your canoe in silence and reflects the sky so perfectly that you can't tell where the lake ends and the stars begin. A thin layer of morning fog hangs over Lake Texcoco, curling around your shoulders like a damp shawl. You paddle slowly, each gentle splash echoing across the endless flatness. Somewhere behind the mist, birds trill a sleepy song. You pass by tufts of reeds that rustle with secrets and see long, low shapes rising like carpets suspended just above the water. Green, lush, impossible. Welcome to the Aztec world of floating gardens. It's beautiful. Yes, but you probably won't survive this. The air's full of insects, the water's full of leeches, and you haven't even figured out how to steer your canoe yet. Your feet are already wet. Your breakfast was just a piece of dried maize, and there's a high chance you'll accidentally row straight into a ceremonial procession and deeply offend a rain god. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how this sleepy little history tour makes its way around the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're floating into the 1400s now, when the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan rises from the lake, like a dream someone made real out of stone and mud. It's not perched on the edge of Lake Texcoco, it's in the lake, right in the center, like a stubborn water lily. And like that flower, it's alive, delicate, yet impossible to uproot. At least for a while. As your canoe glides nearer, the air changes. It's warmer here. The wind carries the scent of wood smoke, wet earth, and crushed marigold petals. Every few seconds you hear the call of vendors, yes, even on the water, because Tenochtitlan isn't just a floating city, it's a floating civilization. And everyone has something to sell. You pass a young boy balancing on a narrow boat, guiding it with a pole longer than he is tall. He's hauling baskets of herbs and flowers, which sway with every wobble of the water. Behind him, a floating garden or chinampa sits peacefully flush with bright squash blossoms and maize, so tall you'd think it grew on stilts. Except it didn't. It grew on mud. That grew on reeds, that were tied to willow roots, that were laced together by people who thought regular land was just too basic. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs invented the Chinampa system themselves or borrowed and enhanced it from earlier Mesoamerican cultures, like the Xochimilca. But either way, the Aztecs turned it into an art form. These weren't rafts floating aimlessly, they were engineered islands, permanent, productive, and rooted in watery soil. And here's the kicker. Chinampas weren't just for farming. They were homes, shrines, schoolrooms, and symbols of cosmic balance. You could grow maize on one side, offer flowers to a deity on the other, and nap under a bean trellis in the middle. Honestly, it makes your city's community garden look a bit underachieving. The fog begins to lift now, revealing more of the lake. It stretches wide and shallow, fringed by mountains in the distance. Little canals snake between the Chinampas, like nature's own grid system. Only this one has no traffic jams, just canoes gliding past, occasionally bumping gently like sleepy bumper cars. You paddle farther into the green heart of the gardens. A man waves at you while harvesting amaranth leaves. He's barefoot, and his calves are coated in drying lake mud. His smile is calm, like someone who knows the soil will never betray him. Nearby, a girl carefully snips chili peppers and sets them in a gourd. She hums a lullaby, and even the dragonflies seem to listen. And you're just floating there wide-eyed, slowly realizing this place isn't just beautiful, it's efficient. The Aztecs grew multiple crops on each Chinampa, staggered their planting to maximize yields, and built canals to irrigate everything naturally. In fact, some scholars argue this was one of the most productive agricultural systems in pre-modern history. Yes, floating gardens. Yes, mud and twigs. Yes, better than a lot of modern farming. You find a spot between two Chinampas where water lilies bloom quietly. You trail your fingers through the cool water. Somewhere below the surface, fish stir in the shadows, and old gods murmur in the mud. A butterfly lands on your knee. You don't dare move. The sun finally breaks through golden and soft. Tenochtitlan gleams in the distance, and the lake begins to shimmer like it's waking up slowly. But you're already halfway asleep, rocked by the rhythm of the water and the quiet dignity of the people who built paradise out of marshland. The city comes closer now, not in a rush, not with fanfare, but with the steady hush of canoes and wind. Tenochtitlan isn't a place that announces itself loudly. It doesn't need to. It just exists confidently balanced between lake and sky, as if the water itself decided to become architecture. As your canoe glides into the main canal, the lake's edge dissolves into a city of stone walkways, bridges, and causeways that float like lily pads in grid formation. But it's the buildings on stilts that catch your eye first. From this low angle, they rise like skeletal legs from the water, their reflections rippling gently as if they're dancing slowly in place. You pass beneath one of the walkways. Above you, a vendor is setting out clay pots filled with steaming tamales. You can't smell them yet, but you know they're wrapped in maize husks, pulled straight from a Chinampa not 10 feet away. This is a city that doesn't import its breakfast. It grows it, out the back door. The walkways connect districts, each a semi-floating neighborhood, and each with its own flavor. Some are crowded with basket weavers and fishmongers. Others are quiet, except for the rhythmic swish of paddles. You drift into one where children sit cross-legged in a row, their feet just above the canal water, watching an old man whittle a god from wood. His knife makes a slow, satisfying sound with every stroke. He looks up once, meets your gaze, and gives a small nod. Like, yes, we know it's weird you're here, but it's okay. You step out of the canoe, your legs wobbly after the ride, and your feet immediately sink half an inch into a causeway covered in smooth pebbles. It's not paved, but it's definitely built raised from the lake floor, with a deliberate hand. You walk along it slowly, passing a row of houses made from mud brick and wood, their roofs lined with drying herbs. There's no smell of rot, no standing water, just damp earth smoldering cook fires, and that ever-present scent of maize. It's worth noting historians still argue whether Tenochtitlan was the most densely populated city of its time. Some estimates suggest it may have rivaled major cities in Europe or Asia. Others say we've exaggerated the numbers, seeing grandeur where there may have been modesty. But walk these canals slowly in the early morning hush, and you'll start to believe the bigger claims. You pause at a bridge. It's not a grand arch, just a series of wooden planks, lashed together and placed atop stones. A woman and her daughter cross it, carrying baskets of chayote squash, whispering about the priest who fainted in the marketplace yesterday. It wasn't spiritual. It was heat stroke. Even rain gods get cranky when dehydrated. Look around. There's no clear distinction between water and city here. That's the magic trick. Homes are built with boat docks for porches. Market stalls float or roll between walkways. And every building seems to grow out of the lake bed like a plant that just decided to bloom stone instead of petals. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing a flute, slow wandering notes that drift like fog. You follow the sound to a small shrine, its base half submerged. Flowers and tortillas rest on the steps as offerings, though one tortilla appears to have been claimed by a hungry turtle. Beneath all this beauty is a constant engineering hum. Chinampas need care. Canals need dredging. Walkways must be rebuilt after floods. None of it is idle. This is a city powered by daily muddy labor and by a population willing to walk barefoot through that labor every morning. You lean over the edge of a chinampa and watch the roots of willow trees dip into the water. Their long fingers help hold the gardens together, anchoring them like moody, leafy tent stakes. Reeds reinforce the edges, and mud dredged from the lake is heaped regularly to replenish the soil. The effect is surreal, like someone is growing islands on a wet quilt. It's no coincidence that the Aztecs saw the world as a series of layers, sky above earth, below watery chaos around it all. And Tenochtitlan mirrors that cosmology perfectly. The water isn't just inconvenient geography, it's sacred architecture. The canals aren't obstacles, they're arteries. And the gardens, well, the gardens are floating temples in a way, temples that happen to grow pumpkins. There's a hush as you step off the bridge and back into your canoe. A dragonfly lands on your hand for a moment, inspects you, and flies off unimpressed. The sun's fully up now, casting long shadows across the water, and the city is fully awake. You, on the other hand, are slowly sinking into that delicious place between alertness and slumber. You blink once slowly, then again. Your guide, a teenager with arms like bamboo poles and a smile full of missing teeth, gives your canoe a gentle push. You float again, weightless, the city behind you, now the gardens ahead. The water laps at the side of the boat. A frog croaks somewhere. A flower petal lands in your lap and stays there like a silent passenger. The city on stilts fades behind the reeds. The gardens are waiting. The sound of your paddle is different here, thicker somehow. You're not sure if it's the mud beneath you or just the dense silence of this green maze, but every stroke feels like you're slicing through velvet. The city is behind you now, and ahead lies the true marvel, the floating gardens of the Aztecs called Chinampas. No less magical than they sound. At first, they're hard to distinguish from regular land. That's part of the trick. These aren't floating mats bobbing along like lily pads. They're stable, almost stubbornly, so fixed in place with underwater wooden pilings and thick roots that knot them to the lake bed. You reach out and touch the edge of one. It doesn't give. The reeds that fringe it shiver, but the garden itself holds fast. You could build a small shrine here. Some people did. A man walks along the edge of one chinampa, humming to himself. He's got a sack of freshly pulled carrots over one shoulder and a parrot on the other. The parrot says something deeply insulting in Nahuatl. You pretend not to notice. The man chuckles. The design is elegant. Chinampas were created by staking out a rectangular frame in the lake shallows, usually about 30 meters long and 2 to 4 meters wide. Into that frame went layers, reeds, branches, lake muck, more reeds, more muck, and finally rich sediment pulled up from the canal bottom. It's like a compost sandwich, moist, earthy, and somehow alive. You step onto one, and feel it spring gently beneath your weight, like a sponge with roots. These gardens weren't random or rare. There were thousands of them around Tenochtitlan, enough to feed a city of perhaps 200,000 people. Some Chinampas were even double-decker, raised up with extra soil over time, thickening into permanent islands with room for houses altars and sun-warmed dogs napping in the shade of maize stalks. Historians still argue whether the Chinampa system qualifies as true hydroponics, or whether it's a form of raised bed agriculture with irrigation benefits. Either way, the results speak for themselves. Maize beans, squash amaranth tomatoes, and chilies flourished here. They rotated crops, managed pests with clever ecological tricks, and farmed year-round, even in the dry season. It's all suspiciously efficient. You pause beside one particularly well-tended Chinampa. Its edges are reinforced with woven mats of reeds, tied to willow saplings, living fences that suck up water and provide shade. At the center is a patch of marigolds blazing gold in the sun. To the Aztecs, these weren't just decoration. They warded off pests and appealed to the gods. Also, they smell slightly of citrus and sunshine, which doesn't hurt. A woman kneels at the far end, her hands buried wrist-deep in the soil. She's planting maize, but not alone. Each maize seed is accompanied by a tiny bean and a sprouting squash vine. This is the ancient companion planting known as the Three Sisters. Maize grows tall and strong. The beans climb the stalks and fix nitrogen into the soil, and the squash sprawls along the ground, keeping the weeds down and the moisture in. If you're imagining a harmonious little veggie family, that's exactly right. She glances up at you, wipes a bit of mud on her chin, and says something about the rain. You nod despite not understanding and glance upward. The sky is impossibly blue, dotted with birds coasting lazily overhead. Rain isn't coming just yet, but it always comes. Eventually. In the next Chinampa, over a group of boys are building up the soil by hand. They drag it up from the canal in woven baskets, huffing and grunting, dumping it in tidy rows. You notice one boy sneakily dump his basket onto his brother's pile and act like he did twice the work. The brother doesn't notice. Yet. The canals between the Chinampas aren't just for show. They're the lifeblood of this place. They carry nutrients, transport goods, and serve as quick passage between homes and markets. You see a canoe float by loaded with fresh flowers, the kind you'd offer to Xochipilli, the god of art, love, and cornfields. Every god gets their Chinampa bouquet. You look down into the canal and see fish swimming in lazy loops. You blink and realize they're not fish at all. They're axolotls, strange little amphibians with feathery gills and eternal smiles. They're native to this lake, rare now, but sacred then. Some people believed they were the transformed remains of gods who fled punishment by diving into the water. Others just thought they made decent stew. To each their own. As you paddle onward, you spot something curious, an old shrine built on a tiny Chinampa, its base crusted with moss. Flowers grow from the cracks. It leans slightly like it's listening to the water. You land your canoe beside it and run your fingers along the carved stone. A spiral, a rain cloud, a handprint. Symbols of agriculture, fertility, and continuity. You sit quietly on the edge of the shrine platform, feet dangling in the canal. The breeze shifts, and you hear laughter far off. A child squeals as he falls into the water and clambers back out covered in algae, triumphant. His sister gives him a squash blossom as a prize. The Chinampas stretch out in all directions, rows upon rows of floating dreams, stitched together with mud, sweat, and ceremony. They're not loud, they don't boast, but they feed the city, they honor the gods, and they rest calmly in the arms of the lake. The parrot from earlier reappears. It lands on your canoe, stares at you a moment, and says something new in Nahuatl. You don't know the words, but the tone is gentler this time. You smile. The gardens smile back. You rise early on the Chinampa well, not because you wanted to, but because a trio of frogs decided to host a grumpy chorus next to your ear. The morning is cool, the mist licking around your ankles like a lazy cat, and everything smells like damp soil, crushed leaves, and breakfast being cooked somewhere not too far away. Smoke curls into the air from a small fire nestled at the edge of a nearby garden, and you catch the warm scent of roasted maize and something spicy. You walk carefully along the edge of the Chinampa, feeling the subtle give of the earth beneath your feet. It's not like walking on a raft. No wobble, no creak. This is land even if it was grown like a vegetable instead of inherited from a mountain. A woman squats at the base of a tall maize stalk, planting marigold seeds. She's humming not a tune exactly, more like a rhythm. The kind of rhythm that matches the beat of planting over and over, row by row. She pauses, presses the seeds down with her thumb and looks up. Tlaloc's watching, she says half-joking. He knows who waters their plants. Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, is everywhere here. His wide eyes and jagged teeth show up on shrines, painted pots, and even the occasional canoe paddle. The Aztecs took him seriously. Too seriously, maybe. Historians still argue whether Tlaloc's worship was mostly symbolic, or whether certain darker rituals were common in this region. Either way, you water your garden thoroughly, just in case. The marigolds aren't here for beauty. They keep pests away and signal the seasons. Next to them, she plants maize, and you join her, mimicking her method. Press the seed, sprinkle the soil murmur, something that could pass as prayer or polite conversation with the dirt. You have to ask the plant nicely, she tells you straight-faced. Rude farmers get rude crops. It's a strangely spiritual process, part gardening, part performance. You begin to feel the rhythm of it, the balance between gesture and growth. And while you're not entirely sure your muttered apology to the squash seed counts as divine communication, it certainly feels better than shouting. A group of children pass by barefoot and laughing, carrying small bundles of herb cuttings. They're on their way to a priest near the canal's edge, who's preparing the morning's offering. Not a sacrifice, just a symbolic gift, cornmeal. A few petals and water poured gently into the lake with a whisper. It's a trade. Please give us rain. Here's a snack. You can respect that. The priest, an older man with calloused hands, and the calm of someone who spends his time between plants and clouds, nods to you as he sprinkles the lake. His chant is slow, melodic, and oddly soothing. You don't understand the words, but the tone says, let things grow, let things live, let things be wet. Behind him, a painted wall depicts an old story, one where a goddess plants maize in the sky, only to weep when it grows upside down. The lesson: always pay attention to your planting direction, or maybe even the gods make gardening mistakes. You can relate. You crouch beside a young girl planting beans. She's 5, maybe 6, and deadly serious about her job. Each bean gets its own tiny whisper and pat on the head. You have to talk to them, she says, as if you're the child here. They don't grow if you ignore them. You ask what she tells them. That they're beautiful, she replies, then adds with a smirk, and that they better not die on me. You help her finish her row. At the end, she rewards you with a single marigold and runs off barefoot in the mud, her laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon. You tuck the flower behind your ear. It's a good look. Probably. The entire Chinampa hums with small, reverent acts, watering here, weeding there, singing under breath. There's no heavy machinery, no buzzing motors, no sterile gloves. Just skin soil song, and a shared understanding that if the gods are happy, and the mud stays wet, food will appear like magic. You wander into a section shaded by young willows, where bundles of herbs hang from wooden frames. A boy no older than 12 is grinding dried chilies into powder, using a stone matot. He sneezes violently, then laughs, then sneezes again. Don't breathe when you grind, he tells you, tears in his eyes. It gets everywhere. Next to him, someone is mixing the powder with salt and ash, creating a seasoning for drying fish or for rituals, depending on who's hungry and who's holy. The lines blur here. Is this garden or temple work or worship? It's all the same soil. There's a small shrine built into the base of a tree nearby. Inside it, someone has placed a perfectly round squash, a feather, and what looks suspiciously like a very well-fed cricket. Offerings, probably, or lunch, or both. As the sun climbs, the heat rises. The plants stretch. You find a shaded patch and sit cross-legged watching dragonflies skim across the canal surface. You're not sure when it happens, but eventually your breathing matches theirs. Slow, silent, expectant. Somewhere in the distance, a drum begins to thump softly. You don't know if it's music or a message, but it doesn't matter. Everything here grows to a rhythm. The marigold behind your ear tickles your cheek. You're waist-deep in mud now. Not because you tripped, though that's always on the table, but because you volunteered somewhat accidentally to help reinforce a Chinampa's edge. The man next to you chuckles as you wobble, balancing a basket of lake muck on your shoulder, like it's a royal offering instead of soggy sludge. Don't worry, he says. If you fall in, the gods will just think you're offering yourself. The Chinampa you're standing on is halfway rebuilt, and you're helping with the dirty part, the reshaping of its spine. Every so often, these floating gardens need patching up. Rain eats the edges, fish burrow underneath, and the occasional clumsy dog decides to dig. So every week, someone sloshes into the canal with a basket, and a mission dredge up the nutrient-rich muck and plop it back where it belongs. You tip your basket forward, and it squelches satisfyingly into the soil. The smell is bold, earthy, slightly fishy, very real. The man beside you, his name is Isdli, which means obsidian grins, and hands you another. His arms are streaked with mud and sunburn, but he moves like someone who's done this since before he could talk. There's a rhythm to it. Wading, scooping, dumping, patting it down with a reed shovel. Step slide scoop. It's messy, but it works. Each layer rebuilds the garden from the ground up, except the ground is also the water, and the water is somehow the sky. Don't think too hard about it. Just keep scooping. Nearby, a group of older women is weaving new reed mats to line the Chinampa borders. They use willow branches as anchors, shoving them deep into the muck, where they'll eventually sprout roots of their own. Living fences holding the garden together with a kind of green determination. One woman sees you watching and waves you over. She hands you a bundle of reeds and nods. Twist, then fold. Not too tight. You try. Your mat looks more like a sad basket with regrets, but she pats your hand kindly. First one's always crooked. You glance at hers, perfectly square. tight as a drum skin. She shrugs. My first one fell into the lake and drowned. There's a quiet wisdom here, nothing formal, no scrolls, no degrees, just the kind that gets passed along with sunburns and calluses. You listen as they talk mostly about the garden, sometimes about dreams, occasionally about gossip. Apparently, someone's parrot bit the village priest and won't apologize. Historians still argue whether Chinampa maintenance was assigned by family guild or local community rule. Some believe elders made the rounds and assigned daily tasks, like a mud-loving mayor. Others think it was more organic. Everyone simply knew when it was their turn. Judging by how effortlessly this group coordinates, you'd believe either theory, or both. After a while, Isley hands you a gourd of water, flavored with lime and chia seeds. It's cool, slippery, and weirdly energizing. You drink deeply, and notice the sky shifting. Clouds are building. Rain's coming. That's good, he says. The mud will stick better. You look back at the Chinampa and realize how much it's changed. The edges are stronger now, fringed with woven mats and anchored willow saplings. The soil's higher, shaped into neat ridges. It's starting to look less like a soggy raft, and more like land again, strong, stubborn land. Floating, but firm. To the untrained eye, it's just a mud pile. But to you, it's a miracle. A deliberate, collaborative annual miracle. And it smells very, very alive. A woman nearby is testing the irrigation canal. She drops a few petals in the water and watches them drift, timing their speed. She mutters a small complaint, then uses a wooden stick to nudge a clump of algae away from the inlet. The petals drift faster. She nods satisfied. Science Aztec style. The canals don't just water the Chinampas, they also serve as highways, fish farms, and sometimes even ritual spaces. Some of them are lined with stones, some with reeds. The more elaborate ones might have little decorative arches of vines or carved poles. You ask Isley, who maintains the deeper canals, the big ones leading back to the city? The stronger backs, he says, and the ones who owe favors. Lunch is called with a conch shell blast. You didn't expect that, but it works. Everyone gathers under a shaded trellis, woven with squash vines, and sits on low mats made of palm fronds. You're handed a warm tamale, wrapped in a maize husk, and a strip of roasted cactus. It's delicious. You weren't ready for it to be delicious, but here we are. You consider asking for the recipe, then remember the recipe is about 4 centuries old and involves divine permission. As you eat, someone starts playing a flute, slow, sleepy notes that spiral into the sky. The clouds rumble gently overhead, but no rain yet. Just promise. You lean back, belly full of maize and spice, fingers still smudged with mud. You look around and realize something. This isn't just gardening. It's architecture. It's community. It's memory held in layers of reed and soil. The Chinampa shivers slightly beneath your weight, not out of weakness, but because everything here is always in motion. Growing, rebuilding, shifting like a breath that never stops. The flute trails off. A dragonfly lands on your knee and stays. The wind picks up cool and steady. The rain will come soon. The rain comes quietly like a curtain being drawn across the sky. It begins as a whisper, tiny drops tapping leaves, tracing the edges of squash blossoms, making the canals wrinkle with ripples. You don't run. No one does. People around you just tilt their faces up slightly, blinking into the drizzle like they've been expecting it for weeks. Which, to be fair, they have. You find shelter beneath a thatched overhang on the side of a Chinampa, still holding your half-finished tamale. The flute music has stopped, replaced by the soft thrum of water on leaves. It's not cold, just wet enough to make everything smell stronger. Mud maize, fresh-cut herbs, and the faint metallic scent of stone soaked with memory. A family joins you under the overhang. 2 parents, 3 children, and 1 spectacularly fluffy dog who shakes all over you as soon as he arrives. The mother wipes her arm with a reed leaf and offers you a piece of cactus candy. You take it. It tastes like honey and regret, but you smile politely. The dog yawns and puts its head in your lap. Congratulations. You live here now. As the rain continues, the family gets back to works, because rain doesn't stop gardening, it fuels it. The father begins mending a broken digging stick, while the mother checks on a small clay-lined storage pit, half buried in the Chinampas soil. It's filled with root vegetables protected by cool mud and lined with banana leaves. No pantry here, just the ground itself doing the storing. The kids, meanwhile, are off chasing frogs with string nets and questionable technique. One proudly brings back a single water beetle and insists it's a gift for Tlaloc. His sister takes one look and drops it into the canal. He's picky, she says, shrugging. As the water trickles from the overhang, you look around and realize something oddly touching. This isn't a communal garden in the modern sense. It's not government land or a shared park. This Chinampa is private, family-owned, passed down, like a story or a cooking pot. Everyone here has a plot, and every plot has a person. But they're also all Chinamperos people of the floating land. So while each family owns their soil, everyone shares the canals, the rain, the rituals, and occasionally the frogs. Historians still debate how strict these family claims were. Some argue that Chinampa plots were tied to noble lineages or tribute systems. Others believe it was more fluid, with informal rights based on usage and maintenance. It's likely that both systems existed layered like the Chinampas themselves. Reed's mud family politics. You're handed a gourd of atoll warm maize porridge, flavored with cinnamon. It's thick and comforting, the kind of food that makes you want a nap even before you finish swallowing. You sip slowly, watching the rain thread down from the sky, stitching silver lines into the lake. As the downpour lightens, the mother picks up a reed broom and begins sweeping water off the walking paths, not out of necessity, but habit. It's meditative, and you wonder how many centuries people have swept this exact patch of mud. Further down the Chinampa, a grandfather is telling a story. His voice is low, worn smooth like a river stone. The children huddle close, still damp, still bouncing with unspent energy. He's speaking of a time when the lake rose too high, when a Chinampa floated away in the night, like a stolen boat. We found it 3 days later, he says, full of ducks, and one very confused turtle. The kids laugh. One of them asks, "Did the gods take it?" The old man nods solemnly. They tried, but the turtle said no. You sip your atole and watch a small canoe drift by, covered in a makeshift awning made from palm fronds. In it, a boy rows lazily, while his grandmother picks basil leaves from a clay pot, balanced on the bow. You're not sure where they're going. They don't seem in a hurry. No one is. Why would they be? The lake provides its own time. You finally step back into the misty rain and start walking the edge of the Chinampa. The air is thick, now warm and soft. A thin veil of fog rises from the lake, blurring the edges of everything Reed's houses, boats, even people. You pass a boy and his grandfather planting chilies. The grandfather is kneeling low, carefully pressing each seed into a hole made with his thumb. "Don't press too hard," he warns. "They'll get mad." The boy frowns. "Plants can't get mad." The grandfather raises an eyebrow. "Tell that to a bitter chili." Farther down the row, someone set up a little altar under a willow tree. A tiny clay figure of Tlaloc sits there grinning with fangs, surrounded by damp feathers and maize husks. A bowl of water has been left in front of him. As you pass, a small gust of wind ripples its surface, like the god is giving his nod of approval, or maybe just checking his reflection. Eventually, the rain fades to a fine mist, then to nothing. Water drips slowly from every leaf, every roof, every vine. The dog from earlier trots past you, now less fluffy and more saturated. He shakes again. You dodge barely. The sky is pale now, milk-white and patient. The Chinampa glows under it, freshly watered, freshly planted, freshly alive. Everything smells richer, deeper. You inhale and realize you're already sleepy again, like the rain soaked straight into your bones, and whispered nap now. You sit under the willow tree cross-legged beside the altar, and feel the ground hum beneath you. Not loud, not obvious, just a soft, constant thrum. The pulse of lake mudroots, and a people who never saw land as something static. The family is packing up tools. Someone sings. The mist returns. You close your eyes for just a moment, and the Chinampa keeps growing. The rain has left everything cleaner, shinier, as if the lake took a long breath and wiped its face. The air is thick with petrichor and the faint, sweet decay of water hyacinths. Somewhere nearby, the first coughs of late morning commerce begin. Your canoe drifts again, gliding through quiet canals that will not stay quiet for long. Then, like turning a corner into a different world, you arrive at the market. This isn't your average market square. It's a floating festival of color, motion, and sound. You blink, not from the brightness, but from the overload. Canoes bump gently against one another, loaded with baskets, boxes, and bundles. Vendors shout in Nahuatl, hawking tomatoes, chilies, herbs, and sweet cakes in clay dishes. And yet somehow, the whole scene feels calm, like organized chaos with a really good memory. This is Xochimilco, the great market on the water. Built on networks of Chinampas and canal crossroads, it thrives on its own rhythm. You're not quite walking and not quite boating, you're doing both. Canoes tie up to Chinampas that serve as booths, and buyers hop between them like frogs on lily pads. Some vendors have built thatched roofs over their rafts. Others just squint in the sun and keep going. A young man offers you a bundle of avocados. They're smaller than you expect, dark-skinned and glistening. You nod politely and decline, and he shrugs, tossing one up and catching it behind his back. Show off. Nearby, a woman arranges orange cempasúchil flowers into wreaths. She hums as she works, looping the stems with strips of agave fiber. "For the god of beauty," she says softly. "Or for your canoe if it's ugly." You glance at your canoe. It's got character. This market isn't just food. It's cloth and pottery tools and pigments, toys and trinkets. You float past a boy selling tiny reed animals, frogs, ducks, jaguars, each one folded and knotted with childish precision. You buy a frog. It costs 2 beans, and the boy throws in a smile for free. Historians still argue whether Xochimilco was primarily a local trade zone or a vital link in the larger Aztec tribute economy. It probably did both. Farmers from the Chinampas sold their goods directly, but they also filled quotas, sending maize squash and flowers to the empire's ruling class. The market was a place of freedom, but also of duty. You pull up beside a floating kitchen, a raft outfitted with a clay stove. a stack of maize husks, and 2 women flipping tortillas at lightning speed. You're offered a tlacoyo, an oblong maize cake stuffed with beans and topped with salsa. It burns your tongue a little, but your soul forgives it. The tortilla is warm, smoky, and deeply unfair to every other form of flatbread. As you chew, you listen. The woman making the tlacoyos talks as she cooks her voice, carrying like the smoke from her fire. My grandmother sold chilies here, she says. Used to swear the lake told her what price to charge. Some days, she gave them away. Said the water was whispering discounts. You're not sure what's more surprising, the story, or the fact that the lake probably did whisper. After all, the canals here are like a living thing, thick with information, gossip, even mood. You glide past another stall and hear 2 old men arguing over Chinampa yields. One swears his squash is bigger because of a turtle he found and adopted. The other insists it's because of singing. Loud, passionate, off-key singing. Plants respond to love, he says, then adds, and mild insults. A boy nearby is selling fish. He's caught himself tiny silver ones that glint in the sun, still twitching slightly, in a shallow bowl of water. You ask what kind they are. The edible kind. He grins and moves on. Above it all, the sun has climbed higher, painting the market in gleaming whites and deep shadows. You can't see the boundaries anymore. Chinampas, canoes, canals, people. It all blurs into a humming, floating ecosystem. There are no straight lines, no tidy lanes, just currents of water, of commerce, of laughter and roasted maize. You pass a small shrine, wedged between 2 market stalls no bigger than a milk crate. Inside sits a clay idol with wide eyes and a cracked smile. Around it, someone's placed beans, feathers, and a painted stone. A sign hangs above it, scratched into wood for good trade and good tomatoes. The crowd is swelling now. Children shriek as they chase each other with fishtails. A vendor drops a basket of prickly pears and curses as they roll into the canal like rebellious snacks. Someone's playing a drum, quick, syncopated rhythms that make your toes tap without permission. You paddle through a row of flower sellers. Their canoes are stacked high with marigolds, orchids, and spindly purple blossoms that smell like cinnamon. The flowers brush your shoulders as you pass petals sticking to your arms like confetti. One seller tosses a handful into your lap. For charm, she says. You thank her, and she adds, also because you look sad. You're not sad. You're just overwhelmed. This place isn't loud in a painful way. It's loud in the way a forest is natural, layered, alive. Eventually, you find a quieter canal trailing out of the market like an afterthought. You drift toward it slowly, away from the shouting and song. Behind you, the market still pulses. But here, the water is calm again. The sounds become memory. The floating gardens resume. You hold the flower in your lap, the frog trinket in your pocket, the taste of tlacoyo on your tongue. The market might move, but the lake stays. You drift quietly now further down the canal, where the hum of the market fades into a lazy chorus of frogs and the occasional bird too proud to nap. The water narrows between high banks of green, where chinampas press closer together. These are the maintenance paths, the unseen veins of the garden system, tended by the quiet, mud-streaked heroes no one writes poems about. They are the canal keepers, the mud dredgers, the weavers of reeds, and let's be honest, the unlucky few who draw the short reed and have to clear out snakes. You paddle under a willow archway and catch sight of one, now a man thigh-deep in sludge, dragging a long rake through the canal bed. His canoe is half filled with water hyacinths and aquatic mosses, and his brow glistens with equal parts sweat and mosquito defiance. He looks up waves lazily, then shushes you with a finger to his lips. "Listen," he says. You do. There's a wet slither. Somewhere beneath the water, something long and sinuous is gliding through the reeds. He watches it with one eye closed, like squinting will make it friendlier. Then, with a practiced flick, he scoops it up on the rake. It's a water snake, medium-sized, harmless-looking, possibly vengeful. Catch and release, he says, tossing it back into a reed tangle. Unless it bites. Then it's stew. You blink. He grins. Maintenance of the canals is an entire ecosystem of its own. The water must flow not too fast, not too slow. Plants must not overgrow and clog the channels. Sediment must be removed and returned to the gardens in gentle, mucky doses. Without this constant attention, the whole floating city begins to sag and choke. Historians still debate whether there were official canal tenders assigned by the Tlatoani the ruler, or whether this labor was shared communally. Some records suggest there were rotating obligations. Today, you weed the Chinampa tomorrow, you dredge the canal, and if you're lucky, next week you get to sit under a tree and pretend to chant at maize. You meet another caretaker downstream. She's older, her face lined like tree bark, her hands strong enough to bend a paddle. She motions for you to help as she clears away tangled roots from an irrigation channel. The water is shallow here, the mud clinging to your ankles like a clingy toddler. But you don't mind. Not when she hums. Her song is slow, low, and loops back on itself. It's not a melody, so much as a presence. You hum with her off-key and confused, and she nods like you've passed some kind of test. Even weeds like music, she mutters, ripping out a particularly enthusiastic one. You take a break on the edge of a Chinampa. Nearby, a boy lowers a string net into the canal. He's not fishing. He's gathering algae for compost. It's used to enrich the Chinampa soil, and sometimes even used in dyes. He pulls it up green and dripping, and holds it proudly, like he's just hauled in a legendary sea beast. "Wanna touch it?" he asks. You politely decline. The canal water is rich with life-fish insects, amphibians, snails, the occasional stubborn turtle, and of course axolotls. You spot one hovering under a patch of duckweed, its little limbs floating like it's meditating. You stare. It stares. You blink. It doesn't. It probably wins. You wander further, walking the narrow edge between two gardens, your feet brushing against overgrown reeds. Every so often you spot a maintenance marker, a carved pole or painted rock, indicating which family tends which stretch of canal. Some are decorated with maize cobs, others with feathers, and one is topped with what appears to be a tiny clay lizard, possibly a mascot. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. The wind hushes. The frogs slow their croaks. Even the insects seem to buzz more politely. You find a man napping in his canoe, one foot dangling in the water, his paddle resting on his chest like a lazy sword. He wakes, only briefly gives you a thumbs up, and drifts back into sleep. The canal keeps flowing. You find a fork in the waterway. One path leads back toward the gardens proper, the other into a tunnel of arching reeds. Naturally, you choose the mystery tunnel. As you glide under the green canopy, it gets darker, cooler. Water drips from leaf tips, like a slow metronome. You're alone now, except for the occasional slap of a fishtail somewhere just out of view, and then there it is again, the wet slither. Another snake. Possibly. A fish. Probably. A ghost. You wouldn't rule it out, but you feel calm here, surrounded by the hum of nature and the soft lap of water against your boat. You trail your fingers in the canal and feel the silt rush between them. It's not dirty. It's the very matter that keeps a city alive. You emerge from the tunnel and find a small maintenance dock, a slab of stone barely visible above the waterline, where someone's left tools sandals, and a carved wooden bowl filled with maize kernels. An offering, maybe, or a snack, or both. A whispering breeze curls past you carrying the scent of rainwood smoke and crushed cilantro. Somewhere back near the market, someone laughs. Farther away, a drum begins again, steady measured, not celebratory this time, just grounding. You turn your canoe back toward the open canals, gently weaving between gardens past patches of basil and amaranth, through sunlight dappling on the water. A heron takes flight beside you, its wings brushing the air with slow applause. Behind you, the maintenance canals fade. Ahead, the gardens wait. But now you see them differently, not just as patches of green, but as living extensions of the lake, held together by hands' roots, and the occasional uninvited snake. You paddle on, smiling. By late afternoon, the air has thickened into gold. The light dances on the canal water like flickering coins, and the shadows of the plants stretch long and elegant across the Chinampas. It's the kind of light that makes everything look sacred, even the mud stains on your tunic, and the bundle of slightly wilting herbs tucked behind your ear. You hear drums again, but this time, not the casual kind. These are slow, deliberate, accompanied by the high, wavering call of a conch shell. The sound carries across the lake through the reeds and into your chest like a heartbeat, not entirely your own. You drift toward it. As you approach, the Chinampas change. They're wider here, better groomed, less cluttered with tools or baskets. You see garlands of marigolds strung between poles, their petals catching the sun like little bursts of fire. Men in ceremonial tunics sprinkle flower petals into the water, and a trail of incense smoke curls from a small stone platform rising just above the canal. This is no ordinary plot. This is a temple garden. The Aztecs didn't build stone pyramids on Chinampas, but they did create sacred spaces, gardens dedicated to gods, living altars, places where crops grew alongside devotion. You've arrived at one dedicated to Tlaloc and Chicomacoatl, the gods of rain and maize, the two most important ingredients in the Aztec recipe for survival. A priest, cloaked in a garment, dyed with crushed cochineal insects, so red it practically hums steps forward and welcomes you without words. He motions for you to sit on a woven mat beneath a trellis draped with climbing beans. You do, slowly, respectfully. The air smells of sage, burnt copal, and crushed tomato leaves. He begins to chant, not loudly, not theatrically. It's more like a whisper that got tired of hiding. You catch fragments words for water words, for breath words for roots and sky. Around him, others echo the words softly, like the garden itself is learning the chant by repetition. Nearby, an offering is being prepared, a low basket, filled with the season's first maize, a ring of squash blossoms, and a clay figure of Tlaloc, with big, staring eyes and jagged teeth. It would be terrifying if it didn't look slightly cross-eyed. A young girl steps forward and places a handful of amaranth into the basket. Then, unexpectedly, she giggles. Her mother hushes her gently, but the priest only smiles and repeats a line of the chant louder. The others laugh quietly. There is reverence here, but not stiffness. This is faith with soil under its nails. You glance down and realize you're sitting on a mat embroidered with spiral patterns, the Aztec symbol for water, for breath, for the constant motion of life. You press your palm to it. The weave is warm. Historians still argue how formal these rituals were, whether every Chinampa farmer participated in state-sponsored ceremonies, or whether most honored the gods in their own quiet, muddy ways. This moment feels like something in between, organized, yes, but not imposed. Sacred, but also local. Like church held in your neighbor's backyard, if your neighbor grew maize and built his altar out of lake stones. The priest finishes his chant with a long exhale. Then, as if that was your cue, a breeze ripples across the canal, stirring the flower garlands and making the incense curl higher. Everyone looks up as if Tlaloc himself just nodded from a cloud. You look too out of politeness. And just like that, the ritual ends. There is no finale, no firework, no explosion of divine light, just soft smiles, nods, and the gentle business of cleaning up. A boy gathers the petals from the water with a basket. A woman folds the mats. The clay figure is placed carefully into a small reed hut near the edge of the garden to rest until next season. You help gather spent blossoms and sweep the edge of the platform. One of the older women presses a sprig of holy basil into your palm. "For good dreams," she says, "and for scaring away snakes." You thank her, unsure which benefit you need more. As the light fades, you wander through a series of temple chinampas, connected by arched reed walkways. Each has its own layout, its own guardian plants, its own miniature altars. One is covered in red flowers and chili plants, clearly favored by Zyptotec, the god of rebirth and agriculture. Another features rows of squash, so perfectly spaced, you suspect divine geometry. In one garden, you find a tiny pond ringed with obsidian shards and white shells. The surface is perfectly still. A reflection pool, or maybe a mirror for the gods. You kneel beside it and see yourself mud-streaked flower crowned with holy basil in one hand and a frog trinket in the other. You look like someone who's lived here forever. You lie back on the warm soil and stare up at the sky. The stars are starting to blink into existence, slow and shy. A bat flits overhead. Somewhere far off, the drums begin again, fainter now, like a heartbeat falling asleep. The Chinampa exhales. So do you. You awaken not with a start, but with a sigh, the kind of sigh that belongs to someone who fell asleep in a garden and woke up with marigold petals in their hair and soil in their ear. The stars are fully out now, but the air is still warm, soft as woven cotton humming with nocturnal life. A frog croaks once. Somewhere a flute plays again this time, low and meandering like it's searching for the right note, but doesn't mind taking the scenic route. You sit up slowly and stretch bones quietly, protesting like old wooden planks. Across the canal, a soft glow flickers oil lamps and fireflies moving in elegant confusion. You paddle toward it, the lake surface smooth as obsidian. With every stroke, ripples fold out behind you, gentle and slow. And then you hear it, voices reciting numbers, names of plants, bits of song. A boy's voice answering a woman's question. Another girl rattling off the stages of maize growth, like she's reciting poetry. You've arrived at one of the floating schoolrooms. That's right, education happened here too. This Chinampa is wide and neat, lined with reed benches and a canopy of vines overhead. Children sit cross-legged, some fidgeting, some focused. An elder stands in front, holding a staff decorated with feathers and maize husks. He doesn't speak loudly, He doesn't need to. Every child is listening more or less. One is poking a gourd with a stick. Classic. You take a seat in the back and try not to draw attention, though your foreignness is about as subtle as a jaguar in a duck pond. The elder recites the Nahuatl names for plants grown on the Chinampas, Xochitl for flower ettle for beans, chili tomatl ahuacatl. You whisper each one under your breath, tasting the syllables like fruit. Some of these words will survive into the modern world, passed along like seeds, avocado, tomato, chili, the sound of the Aztec world tucked into your grocery list. He moves on to numbers using kernels of maize as counters. The kids add and subtract, with little piles of food giggling when the beans roll into the canal. No snacking during math, he says half-heartedly. One girl ignores him and crunches anyway. Next comes ethics, a bit of wisdom passed on like garden instructions. He speaks of balance between work and rest speech, and silence planting and harvest. A Chinampa grows best when all things are in harmony, he says. So does a person. You glance down at your muddy hands and quietly nod. Historians still discuss how widespread education was among commoners in Aztec society. While the nobility attended formal schools Kalmakak for priests and Telpochkali for warriors, it's believed that children of farmers and artisans learned from elders in settings just like this, under trees, beside gardens, among the growing things. Practical oral deeply rooted in place. Tonight's lesson ends with song. The children rise and form a circle, singing a hymn to the maize god. Their voices are soft and high, not polished but pure. One boy keeps missing his cue, and everyone laughs, including the teacher. No scolding, just joy. You step back into your canoe, gliding away as the song fades behind you. Along the bank, you see a group of teens tending a row of young bean plants. They're not in class, but they're still learning, debating the best time to water, how deep to bury the roots. One claims to have dreamt the answer. The others aren't convinced. Farther along, another group sits around a low fire, their teacher a woman with white braids, who's holding up pieces of pottery and explaining how each pattern tells a story. She's not just teaching art, she's teaching memory. One bowl shows a jaguar chasing stars, another depicts a Chinampa surrounded by snakes. A third simply shows hands planting maize. The woman catches your eye and holds up the bowl with the planting hands. The gods gave us fingers for this, she says, to dig, to grow, to remember. You pass her slowly, nodding your thanks. She nods back, then turns to her students and launches into a tale about a water spirit who tried to grow corn upside down. Hilarity, you assume, ensues. Your canoe glides into quieter waters now. Stars ripple on the surface. Fireflies blink lazily above the reeds. You feel full not with food, but with knowing. This place isn't just a system of gardens. It's a living curriculum. The soil teaches patience. The water teaches flow. The people teach by doing, failing, singing, planting again. You run your fingers along the inside of the canoe. It's smooth, worn from generations of hands. You wonder how many children were ferried across this canal, how many lessons were whispered between oar strokes, how many futures were grown one seed at a time. You breathe in deeply, and the night gives you the scent of warm wood lake fog, and a trace of incense lingering from the temple gardens. Your body feels heavy in the best way. Your eyes slip half shut. You're learning something too, though no one said it aloud, that quiet grows best in soft mud. That knowledge floats, that even dreams have roots. By the time you reach the next Chinampa, the moon is high enough to leave fingerprints on the water. Everything's silver, everything's still, except for the smoke. It curls gently from a small outdoor fire where tortillas warm on a clay griddle and something spicy simmers in a blackened pot. The scent hits you like a lullaby chili squash beans, a hint of smoke-dried tomatoes. Someone is making dinner. You dock your canoe beside a flat garden that glows in moonlight rows of maize stalks, rustling like old paper, and squash vines curling lazily across every inch of ground. It's a family Chinampa, this one. You can tell by the scattered tools, the hammock strung between two young willows, and the bundle of herbs hanging to dry near a low kitchen altar. A woman waves you over. She's flipping tortillas with her bare fingers, a bowl of beans beside her, a dish of green salsa not far from your face. You nod politely. She hands you one without speaking. The tortilla is still warm. You bite. It tastes of maize and moonlight. Dinner is informal, like everything here. Just family and neighbors, sitting on woven mats, balancing clay bowls in their laps. A little girl sneaks an extra helping of beans. A teenage boy eats directly from the pot. No one stops him. One elder tells a long story about a rabbit that stole his sweet potatoes, and halfway through even he forgets the ending. This is where Tenochtitlan eats, not in palaces or high temples, but right here, between Chinampas beside the water, with tortillas in one hand and laughter in the other. The Aztec diet, built almost entirely from Chinampa crops, was a marvel of plant-based nutrition. Maize was the cornerstone, of course, but so were beans, chilies, amaranth, squash, tomatoes, avocados, and an alphabet of herbs. Protein came from beans, and also fish ducks, insects, and even the occasional frog, willing or not. And if you were very lucky, you might get a whaddle the tiny caviar-like eggs of lake insects, nutritious, crunchy, and definitely an acquired taste. The boy sitting near you holds one up and dares you to try it. You do. You immediately regret it, but smile anyway. He nods with approval. Historians still debate the extent of Chinampa-fed luxury among the upper classes. Did the nobles eat the same tortillas as farmers? Or did their meals include only the rarest harvests? White maize, blue tomatoes, golden amaranth. The truth probably lies in the middle food, from the lake fed everyone. But some got the fluffier tortillas. A woman offers you a tolly, a maize-based drink, flavored with herbs. It's thick, warm, a little tangy. Perfect for easing into dreams. She adds a pinch of salt, stirs it with a carved stick, and tells you it's a good night to thank the maize goddess. Chicomacoatl listens best after dinner, she says. Full bellies get full blessings. Nearby, someone passes around a clay dish of fried chapulines, grasshoppers dusted with chili and lime. You take one. Crunch. Spicy. Salty. Surprisingly satisfying. The texture is, let's say, assertive. You look around at the circle. These aren't people hosting a dinner party. They're simply eating as they've done every evening for generations. The food is from their own soil. The water is from the canal. The fire is from yesterday's dried reeds. And the warmth, well, that's the kind of magic no empire can legislate. A toddler waddles by holding a half-eaten tamale like it's a royal decree. He trips, falls, and the tamale lands face down in the dirt. A brief silence follows. Then his mother picks it up, blows on it, hands it back. Crisis averted. As you sip your drink, the stories begin again. One elder tells of a time the lake froze over an extremely rare event, and how everyone tried to walk on it and fell through. even the ducks, he adds. Another woman tells of a Chinampa that grew only spicy chilies even when they planted maize. It was cursed, she says, or blessed, depending on your tongue. You ask how they season their beans. 3 people answer at once. Epazote, holy basil salt, if the gods are kind. You nod. All are correct. The stars shift. The fire dies down. The bowls are emptied. Someone starts humming an old lullaby, slow and tuneless. The children curl up in shawls. The wind moves through the maze like a hand over a harp. You're handed a small clay token before you leave. It's shaped like a maize cob. For luck, they say, and to remind you to eat slowly. You climb back into your canoe, heavier than when you arrived, but in the best way. You drift past gardens still glistening with dew, past shadows of families laughing in moonlight. You think about how food grown on water can still feel grounded, and how tortillas somehow hold entire cultures inside them. You take one last bite of the one tucked in your belt, still warm. The moon is high and clear now, polished like obsidian, and hanging right over the water. You glide through canals that glitter faintly, each ripple catching silver. The air is so still, so quiet, that even your breath feels like a ripple on the surface of the world. And yet ahead, you hear something unexpected. Rhythmic grunts, the faint clash of wood and laughter. You follow the sounds around a bend, ducking beneath a low-hanging canopy of vines, and arrive at a Chinampa that looks less like a garden and more like a training ground. There are no rows of maize here. Instead, a group of men shirtless barefoot and glowing faintly in the moonlight are sparring with wooden staves, Aztec warriors, on a Chinampa, training under stars. You blink. One of them shouts a mock insult at his opponent and is immediately tackled into a shallow canal. Everyone cheers, even the frogs. They're young but serious. This isn't a war camp. It's something older, softer, and more complicated. These warriors are also farmers. They plant by day and practice by night. You realize that the divide between soldier and gardener here is as narrow as the canal between Chinampas. One man, tall, scarred and humming a victory song, motions you closer. You want to learn how to stab a pumpkin with honor, he asks. You decline politely. He shrugs. Wise. They bruise easily. It turns out many of the Empire's soldiers came from these farming families. Even the legendary eagle and jaguar warriors often grew their own food. Because a warrior who understands hunger understands discipline, and because nothing says balance like weeding your bean rows between combat drills, historians still argue how formalized this dual identity was. Were all farmers expected to serve as soldiers, or only some? Was the Chinampa their home base, their reward, or just the place they returned to when the battles ended? As always, the truth grows in layers rooted in duty, watered by pride. You sit beside the training space and watch them work. Their movements are precise, but not stiff. Each strike is followed by a pause, a joke, or a wink. One man loses his grip on his staff and blames a vengeful tomato spirit. Another takes a break to sip from a gourd and offer a toast to peaceful weeds and glorious bruises. And still, the garden grows behind them. A boy, maybe 14 summers old, breaks off from the group and tends to a patch of chilies nearby. He moves carefully, picking only the ripest ones, placing them in a reed basket. He wipes his brow, then turns and swings a staff overhead with the grace of someone who's practiced between sunrises. You ask him if he prefers fighting or farming. He grins and says farming. You don't bleed when squash fights back. Nearby, another young man is fixing a break in the canal's edge. He uses a mat of reeds, pressing it into the soil with the flat of his blade. It's strange watching a tool of war used for gardening. But here it makes sense. There's no contradiction. Just layers. Even the training itself is infused with agricultural metaphor. The lead instructor, an elder, with a limp and a very dramatic feathered cape, barks instructions using farming terms. Strike, like a dropped maize cob. Stand like a ripe squash. Flow like beans in a boiling pot. You're not sure what any of that means, but the others seem to. As the sparring slows, they form a circle around a small fire. Someone passes around tamales filled with roasted chilies and beans. No meat tonight. This is sacred food for strength and stamina. One man prays softly over his tamal, thanking the earth and the canal both. Another bites in without waiting. His friend whacks him with a corn husk. One of the younger warriors brings out a clay flute carved in the shape of a hummingbird. He plays a tune-light fluttering barely audible. It sounds like wings in motion, like breath held too long. You close your eyes and feel it fill your chest. You open them to find the group staring at the stars. They name constellations with the same ease they name plants. That one's the serpent. That one the maize god's braid. That cluster, the sky lake where all the Chinampas came from. It's probably not in any astronomy book, but it might be truer than most. You ask one of them if the stars help with battle planning. He nods. They help with planting, too. There's a long silence after that. Not empty, but full of stories unsaid of generations stacked like layers of soil of calloused hands that know both how to cradle a stalk of maize and wield a macuahuitl blade. As you get back in your canoe, one of the warriors calls out, "Come back tomorrow. We'll show you how to fight a cactus." You promise to consider it. You paddle away slowly, passing by a chinampa still steaming from the day's sun. It smells of chilies and rain-soaked soil. In the distance, someone is singing a slow, low chant about roots and rivers. It mingles with the frog croaks. The cricket strums the rustle of bean vines. You feel it again, that strange duality, that the hand that plants the seed is not so different from the one that draws the bow, that strength grows from softness, that warriors too need dinner laughter and dreams. You drift onward wrapped in starlight and the smell of roasted maize. The night deepens, and the moon hangs lower now, lazily skimming the tops of the maize stalks like a sleepy cat. Your canoe drifts silently along a canal that feels more like a hallway of dreams, lined with flowering trellises, soft moss underfoot, and 1,000 flickering fireflies that seem to blink in sync with your breath. The Chinampas here are quieter than before. No warriors, no priests, just dreamers. You pass under an arch made of woven reeds and blooming morning glory vines. The petals are closed, now sleeping until sun's return. Beneath the arch, someone has left a floating bundle of marigold petals and basil leaves gently bobbing in the current, like a lullaby set adrift. It smells faintly of lemon and smoke. You're in the dream gardens now. That's what the locals call this part of the lake. Not because it's filled with mystics or shamans, but because this is where people go to sleep, literally. Families build their reed houses here, with openings toward the east, so the first rays of dawn bless the Chinampas. Here, the gardens don't just feed the body, they feed the spirit. You paddle closer to a small home, its walls woven from cane and roofed with palm thatch. Light spills from its doorway, golden and soft. Inside, an elder is brushing a little girl's hair while humming an old tune. You can't hear the words, but the melody curls around your ribs and tucks itself in beside your heart. Outside, the rest of the family is bedding down beneath a flowering arch. Their mats are rolled out on raised platforms of soil covered in reed blankets. One child clutches a maize doll. Another whispers something to the moon, then drifts off mid-sentence. You're waved over by a grandmother, her hair long and silver braided with dried herbs. She invites you to sit. You do, and she places a small clay bowl of crushed flowers and water at your feet. For dreams, she says. Put your fingers in. Just once. You obey, dipping your hand into the bowl. The water is cool. It smells of marigold chamomile and something faintly peppery. As you withdraw your fingers, she marks your forehead with a damp thumb and whispers something old and slow. They'll come now, she says, smiling. You glance around at the other sleeping forms people swaddled in. Quiet, their breathing rising and falling like the lake itself. Some mutter in their dreams. One man snores like a jaguar with a cold. But mostly, there's peace here. Historians still debate how deeply the Aztecs believed in dream symbolism. Some claim dreams were portals to the divine, a way for commoners to receive messages from the gods. Others think it was more rooted in daily life, a chance for ancestors to give farming advice, or for maize spirits to complain about dry soil. Either way, dreams mattered, enough that there were rituals for them. You look down the canal and see another Chinampa, this one blanketed entirely in blooming flowers. It's a dream sanctuary, used for vision quests, sleep ceremonies, or perhaps just for very romantic frogs. No one lives there, but someone clearly tends it. A wind chime of shells clinks gently in the breeze. An incense smoke snakes from a small bowl at its center. You glide closer, docking quietly. The air smells like copal and wet flowers. You lie back on the grass, the canoe gently tied to a stake beside you. Above, the stars have multiplied, crowding the sky with light. And then the dreams begin. Not wild, not terrifying, just soft, strange flickers. You're planting beans with your childhood self. You're paddling with a parrot that speaks poetry. You're watching maize grow in fast forward taller than trees, whispering your name with each rustle. A face appears familiar, but not quite human. Eyes like water, teeth like cracked stone. Tlaloc, maybe. He doesn't speak. He just tilts his head and gestures toward the soil. You reach down and pull out a handful of beans shaped like tiny hearts. One of them pulses. You wake with a start, or maybe a sigh. Hard to tell. The stars are still above you. The fireflies still blink. The canoe rocks gently beside you, but you're not sure you ever really left it. A breeze stirs the tall grass, and a night heron lets out a half-hearted squawk. You sit up, hands brushing dewdrops off your arms. Your dreams cling to you like mist, like memories like vines. You push off from the dream Chinampa, your paddle dipping quietly into the black glass of the canal. The water holds your reflection, but it's blurred now, braided with stars and shadow smile lines and garden soil. You pass another family Chinampa. A man lies asleep with one hand resting on a hoe. A child dozes beside a basket of beans. Even the dog is curled up beside a pile of maize husks. You float on quietly, not wanting to disturb the spell of the night. Every Chinampa you pass seems to breathe, inhale, exhale, like the entire lake is dreaming through its gardens. At one bend, you see a boat tied loosely to a dock, swaying softly. A clay bowl of herbs smolders beside it. A note carved into the wood reads, "Do not wake me, unless the maize gods say so." You don't. You paddle onward, surrounded by silence. The stars ripple in the water beside you. Your reflection smiles. You didn't just visit the Chinampas tonight. You slept in them. You awaken to a strange hush deeper than silence, as if the lake itself is holding its breath. The stars are still out, but the first blush of dawn is beginning to stain the eastern sky a soft pink. The water glows faintly like the world is just beginning to remember its shape. You sit up in the canoe blanket of mist, still draped across your shoulders. The air is cooler now. Everything is dewy and damp, but something feels off. You paddle slowly, turning down a canal that should be familiar, but it isn't. This part of the Chinampa system has changed. The water here is cloudy, thick with silt. The plants along the banks are overgrown or dying, and the gardens themselves seem to sag. Wooden stakes rot at odd angles. Willow roots hang like forgotten ropes. The neat rows are gone, and so is the hum of daily life. No voices, no frogs, just the soft creak of your paddle. You've arrived in a memory of collapse. Not every Chinampa survived. Not every canal stayed clean. And not every tradition withstood the weight of conquest. The Spanish came, and with them came hooves, iron horses stomping into floating fields. They brought axes, diseases, churches, and names for gods who didn't know how to swim. They drained some canals, filled others with rubble, and turned sacred plots into cattle paths. Historians still debate how quickly the Chinampa system began to unravel. Some say it was immediate gardens crushed beneath boots and carts. Others claim the system limped along for decades, even centuries held together by stubborn farmers who whispered old prayers while pretending to say new ones. You dock your canoe beside a half-sunken platform. It's covered in reeds and broken pottery, the remnants of someone's altar. A maize cob lies there dried and cracked, wrapped in a scrap of red cloth. A final offering, or just something left behind. You walk carefully along the garden edge. Your feet sink deeper into the soil here, too wet, too loose. The water no longer flows, it stagnates. Mosquitoes hover. You see a turtle trying to crawl through thick algae and give it a helpful nudge. It looks back at you like finally. You come upon a house collapsed. Its roof has caved and its walls overtaken by vines. A dog bowl still sits by the door filled with rainwater and ghost memories. Someone once lived here, grew things, laughed, slept beneath stars. Now it's quiet, and yet not dead. As the light rises, you notice green poking through the cracks. New bean sprouts, squash leaves coiled tight, but rising. Nature doesn't mourn the way people do. It waits, rebuilds, spills into absence like water into low ground. You walk to the edge of the canal, where a willow leans low enough to kiss the surface. Its roots are tangled with old twine, forgotten stakes, and oddly, a child's doll, carved from maize husk. You untangle it gently and place it upright on a dry patch of soil. A bit of the old world propped up again. A bird lands nearby, just a small finch, but it begins to peck at the soil, searching, or planting, or both. You pause beside a patch of dirt that once held amaranth. You kneel, press your hand into the earth. It's still soft, still ready. You push your fingers in and plant the basil sprig the grandmother gave you. It stands a little crooked, but proud. Maybe no one will see it. Maybe it won't grow, but maybe it will. You push off again canoe, bumping softly against roots and debris. You follow a canal that's thinner now, barely a trickle, but it leads somewhere. It always does. You pass more abandoned Chinampas, some barely visible beneath vines, others reclaimed by trees. and yet here and there signs of life persist. A child's footprints, a bundle of maize stalks tied with fresh string, a reed mat rolled up and stored out of the rain. There are whispers here, not ghostly ones, just quiet ones, stories that still linger in the mud. You hear a distant sound, soft chopping, a shovel, a paddle. You follow it. Rounding a bend, you see an old man tending a small Chinampa. Alone, carefully. He wears a wide straw hat and hums a song older than the empire. You watch in silence as he weeds, waters hums, and straightens a row of young tomato plants with the precision of a priest, arranging altar candles. He sees you, nods. Some stayed, he says simply. You nod back, hard to forget the way things used to grow. The sun is rising now, casting long light across the water. The broken parts don't vanish, but they shine. Cracks catch gold. Decay turns luminous. Even the abandoned altar glimmers slightly. As you leave, you glance over your shoulder. The man is still working the garden, still blooming in his care. The basil you planted stands straight now, wind-catching its leaves. Collapse isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just a long pause. And the lake remembers everything. The morning breaks gently without drama, just light pressing through the mist, like a polite guest, peeling back the edges of night one reed at a time. You're drifting now, not paddling, just coasting past Chinampas, both restored and wild past willows, shaking off dew past birdsong rising like steam. You've returned to the living gardens. Here, the Chinampas still breathe with purpose. There are people again, faint silhouettes moving among the plants, laughing, scolding chickens, dragging baskets of soil that smell of promise. You pass a woman washing her hair with lake water, and crushed hibiscus, her voice lilting in song. A boy sits beside her, slicing squash with a knife far too big for him. The squash wins the first round. You tie your canoe beside a low dock and step onto a garden bordered with flowers. An older man squats nearby, coaxing a stubborn bean sprout to rise. He pats the soil around it like it's a misbehaving dog. Grow straight, he mutters. We're watching. He smiles when he sees you. The lake teaches patience. You kneel beside him. The soil is damp and warm. The air smells green. You help him plant the rest of his row, and he tells you what each plant needs. Not just water, not just sun, but music. Conversation sometimes compliments. Beans are dramatic, he whispers. But chilies respect confidence. As you work, he tells stories of floods and droughts, of fish that vanished, and fish that returned, of Chinampas that floated away and came back with strangers on them. One tale is about a ghost that plants maize in the wrong season, just to confuse farmers. We call him the Fool of Spring, he chuckles. A woman passes carrying a baby on her back and a basket on her head. The baby is asleep. The basket is full of epazotes. She nods at you, and the baby waves in his sleep. You wave back just in case. Historians still puzzle over how these gardens survived at all, how something so fragile, so wet, so inconvenient could last through conquest, modernization, and centuries of indifference. The answer, perhaps, is love. The kind that doesn't make speeches, just digs plants and gets back to work. You help carry a pile of reeds to the edge of the Chinampa, where another man is reinforcing the border. He knots the bundles carefully, tying them to young willow trunks that will grow into living fences. We're still building, he says. Always. A canoe glides by loaded with flowers. The rower sings to them. The flowers do not sing back, but they seem to nod. You pause for breakfast. Fresh tortillas, beans, a sliver of soft white cheese. A boy offers you a scoop of insect eggs. You smile and pretend to consider it. He grins and eats them himself. The sky is full now, full of sun, full of birds, full of the sounds of life recommencing. Hammers clack against wood. Water sloshes in buckets. Someone scolds a goat. Somewhere a drum taps out the day's pulse. You walk along the canal's edge, watching a young girl teaching her little brother how to plant basil. She's patient, explaining everything twice. He listens once. Their mother watches from a hammock, shelling beans, one eye closed. You return to your canoe, now covered in pollen and a little muddy. You push off gently, paddling through the bright water one last time. The Chinampas stretch out behind you like green rafts, stitched to memory. You pass familiar places now, the temple gardens, the dream sanctuaries, the training plots and dinner fires. They're all still here. The parrot from before squawks somewhere in the distance. You smile, wondering if it still remembers your terrible planting form. You let the current carry you through the final stretch. Reeds lean in like curtains. The air grows thick and slow. Even the sun seems to yawn. And now, you slow your breathing. In and out. The lake hushes around you, soft as a blanket. The water holds your canoe like a cradle, rocking it in the gentlest rhythm almost imagined. You lie back, close your eyes, feel the faint warmth of the sun on your cheek, the cool kiss of air brushing your fingertips as they trail lazily through the water. The smells soften less chilly now. More earth. The lake has fed you, taught you, held you. The Chinampas pass like islands in a dream, each one leaving a whisper behind. A prayer, a joke, a squash blossom curled up like a sleeping hand. You are full now, not just of stories or tortillas, or the quiet bravery of a flower blooming on water, but of the slow, steady rhythm of people who made land grow where none should exist. Let that rhythm carry you. Let the scent of basil and damp stone stay with you. There is no hurry. The canals don't rush. The wind moves gently. The birds hush their calls. Even the frogs have settled into sleep. You are floating, cradled, rooted and drifting all at once. Tonight, when you dream, you'll find yourself barefoot in a garden that hums planting seeds in moonlight and laughing with strangers you somehow know. Sleep now. The lake remembers, and it remembers you.